Beneath your feet, an invisible disaster is unfolding across America. According to a 2021 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, more than one-third of the United States Corn Belt, nearly 30 million acres of farmland, has completely lost its carbon-rich topsoil. The Midwest alone has lost over 57 billion tons of soil in just 160 years of farming. That is roughly 25 times faster than nature can replace it. As soil scientist Bruno Basso of Michigan State University put it, we lose about a pound of soil for every bushel of corn we produce. Most Americans believe the Dust Bowl of the 1930s was the worst soil catastrophe in our history, but a quieter, slower Dust Bowl is happening right now, hidden beneath fields of corn and soybean. And what most people do not know is this: the land that became America's breadbasket was not built by wheat, it was not built by corn, it was built by a handful of forgotten plants, plants with roots that reached 20 feet into the earth, plants that pulled nitrogen out of thin air, plants that mined minerals from depths no tractor will ever touch. We plowed them under, we forgot they existed, but they are still here, and they can still save the soil. Here are 15 of them. Number 15, crimson clover. In the Deep South, long before chemical fertilizers existed, farmers planted a sea of blood-red flowers every winter and watched their exhausted fields come back to life. A single winter planting of crimson clover in Mississippi has been measured to produce 5,500 pounds of dry biomass and fix 135 pounds of nitrogen per acre by late April. That is more nitrogen than most fertilizer bags promise, and it costs almost nothing. Crimson clover does something else just as important. Its bright red blooms feed pollinators emerging from winter hibernation, and fields planted with it host up to 50% more pollinators than bare ground. A single seeding of crimson clover can replace 30 to 50 pounds of synthetic nitrogen for the next crop. In a country that spends billions on fertilizer every year, that math should change everything. Number 14, hairy vetch. In a 35-year USDA field trial in northwestern Louisiana, scientists planted cotton year after year on the same ground. The fields that grew hairy vetch as a winter cover crop outperformed the conventionally fertilized fields for 35 consecutive years. Hairy vetch is a sprawling legume with delicate purple flowers, and its vines can climb up to 12 feet long by spring. Working with nitrogen-fixing bacteria in its roots, hairy vetch can deliver more than 200 pounds of biological nitrogen per acre, free of charge, to whatever crop follows. Research shows that close to 90% of the nitrogen in vetch comes directly from the atmosphere. A no-till system using rye and hairy vetch has been shown to match or beat the yield of conventional tilled fields treated with 60 pounds of synthetic nitrogen per acre. One field of vetch can replace a $400 per acre fertilizer bill while quietly rebuilding soil organic matter year after year. Number 13, buckwheat. Most people know buckwheat as a breakfast grain. Few realize it is one of the fastest soil rejuvenators on Earth. Buckwheat is ready to be cut and worked into the soil in just 35 to 40 days. What makes it remarkable is what happens beneath the surface. The roots of buckwheat release mild organic acids that can dissolve phosphorus locked away in calcium-bound mineral compounds, phosphorus that other crops simply cannot reach. Research from North Dakota State University found that buckwheat absorbed roughly 2.5 times more phosphorus from calcium-bound sources than wheat did. It also activates slow-release rock phosphate, meaning it unlocks fertilizer your soil already contains but cannot use. Above ground, buckwheat is a weed killer. Field studies have measured up to 98% weed suppression. And recent research showed something even more astonishing. When buckwheat senses competing weeds nearby, it actually changes its root chemistry, secreting compounds that poison them. A plant that does that in 30 days is not just food, It is a living soil engineer. Number 12. Comfrey. In the gardens of Old England, a tall plant with rough leaves and purple bell-shaped flowers was once treasured by farmers as the original living fertilizer. They called it knit bone. We call it comfrey. Comfrey's most remarkable feature is hidden underground. Its taproot can reach 10 feet deep, penetrating heavy clay and subsoil layers no other garden plant will touch. As it grows, comfrey pulls potassium, calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus up from depths your vegetable crops will never reach, and concentrates those minerals in its leaves. Permaculture gardeners use what they call the chop and drop method. They cut comfrey leaves 4 or 5 times a year and lay them as mulch around fruit trees and vegetable beds. The leaves decompose in days, releasing a concentrated dose of deep earth nutrition right onto the topsoil. Once you plant comfrey in the right location, it is essentially impossible to kill. Even tiny fragments of root will regenerate. Choose your patch carefully, because comfrey will outlive you. Number 11. Wild lupine. The Latin name lupinus comes from lupus, the word for wolf. Early settlers in America believed lupine wolfed down the soil because it grew in places nothing else would. They had it exactly backward. Wild lupine was not eating the soil, it was building it. Lupine is a pioneer plant. It moves into bare sand, scorched earth, post-mining ground, and stretches of land that have been stripped of nutrients. Through a partnership with nitrogen-fixing bacteria in its roots, it converts atmospheric nitrogen into a form usable by other plants. Within a few seasons, soil that was essentially dead becomes capable of supporting grasses, wildflowers, and eventually trees. Wild lupine is also the only plant the federally endangered Kana blue butterfly larvae will eat. When lupine vanished from large parts of the eastern United States, the Kana blue vanished with it. Restoring lupine restores entire ecosystems. It is one of the first plants able to live where nothing else can, and where it lives, life returns. Number 10. Sunflower. After the Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986, scientists faced a problem with no obvious solution. Radioactive cesium and strontium had saturated the soil and water around the plant, so they planted sunflowers. The sunflowers pulled radioactive isotopes out of contaminated water through a process called phytoremediation, and the company managing the project reported the cleanup cost dropped dramatically compared to conventional methods. But sunflowers are not just for nuclear disasters. They are hyperaccumulators of lead, cadmium, zinc, nickel, copper, and arsenic. A Chrysler automotive facility in Detroit used sunflowers alongside Indian mustard to clean lead-contaminated soil, cutting cleanup costs by more than half. For a country with millions of urban lots, brownfield sites, and lead-contaminated yards near old gas stations and factories, the sunflower offers something remarkable. A summer of beauty that quietly extracts poisons from the ground. The Native American tribes of the Great Plains understood this. They planted the sunflower as the fourth sister on the north edge of their corn, bean, and squash gardens, long before modern science gave the practice a name. Number 9. Tillage radish. Farmers call it the bio-drill. Tillage radish, also known as daikon radish, has a taproot so powerful it can punch through compacted hardpan layers that have broken tractor blades and bent steel subsoilers. Its root grows up to 6 feet deep in a single season. The word daikon literally means big root in Japanese. Plant it in late summer and the radish goes to work, drilling vertical channels through soil layers no machine can break apart without massive disturbance. When winter temperatures drop below 25 degrees Fahrenheit, the radish naturally winter kills. It rots in place, leaving behind a vast network of root channels that the next year's crops can use to push their own roots deep into the soil. One Michigan study measured over 3,700 pounds of root biomass per acre left behind. Beyond breaking compaction, tillage radish scavenges leftover nitrogen from cash crops, preventing the nitrogen from leaching into groundwater. That single function helps reduce the agricultural runoff that creates the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico every summer. It is one of the most powerful soil tools available to American farmers, and it costs the price of a packet of seeds. Number 8. Partridge pea. In old prairie folklore, this plant was called the sleeping plant because its leaves close at the slightest touch. But partridge pea has a quiet superpower. On degraded mining land, where the soil has been stripped to bare rock and clay, partridge pea has been shown to deliver the same nitrogen benefit to a following corn crop as applying 100 pounds of synthetic fertilizer per acre. It is native to nearly the entire eastern half of the United States. It is the larval host plant for the cloudless sulfur, sleepy orange, and little yellow butterflies. And it has a fascinating biological feature almost no garden plant has. Partridge pea grows extrafloral nectaries, tiny reddish-orange glands at the base of every leaf that produce nectar outside the flower. These glands feed ants and parasitic wasps that hunt down pests directly on the plant. It is a built-in biological pest control system. The USDA uses partridge pea in mine reclamation seed mixes to start ecological recovery on ground that has been completely destroyed. And it does all of this as a simple annual, reseeding itself year after year with no help from anyone. Number 7. Sun hemp. In just 60 to 90 days, sun hemp can fix 120 pounds of nitrogen per acre into the soil. That figure comes directly from the United States Department of Agriculture. Sun hemp grows at roughly 1 foot per week. It produces over 20% more biomass than crimson clover or hairy vetch in research trials, and it actively suppresses root knot nematodes, the parasitic worms that destroy vegetable farms across the South, by up to 90%. Sun hemp has been cultivated in India for over 3,000 years for both fiber and soil fertility. But most American farmers have never heard of it. That is starting to change. A farm in Florida called L&M Farms converted 2,000 acres to sun hemp as their sole cover crop, dramatically cutting their fertilizer bill. In a country where fertilizer prices spike every time a war breaks out overseas, a plant that produces its own nitrogen at lightning speed and chases off soil parasites at the same time should be a household name. Number 6. Cowpea. In 1896, a young scientist named George Washington Carver arrived at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. The American South was in crisis. Decades of cotton monoculture had stripped the soil of nitrogen and organic matter. Farmers, especially black sharecroppers, were trapped in a cycle of poverty and dying land. Carver had an answer. Cowpeas. Along with peanuts and sweet potatoes, the cowpea was the legume he used to rebuild the soil of the entire southern United States. Cowpeas add 40 to 80 pounds of nitrogen per acre to depleted ground. Carver published 4 separate Tuskegee bulletins on cowpeas alone. He invented the Jessup wagon, a horse-drawn classroom that brought soil rebuilding methods directly to rural farmers. Within a few decades, the South recovered. Carver once said, "Whoever controls the food controls the people." He understood that healthy soil is the foundation of freedom. And the cowpea, that humble, drought-tolerant, soil-restoring legume, is still dramatically underplanted in America today. We forgot what saved us once. Number 5. Eastern gamagrass. This is corn's wild ancestor. It looks similar enough that people sometimes mistake it for Johnson grass. But Eastern gamagrass is something different. It is one of the most ancient native grasses in North America, and its roots regularly reach 10 to 20 feet deep, punching through the dense clay hardpan that kills most modern crops. USDA Agricultural Research Service scientists discovered that Eastern gamagrass has a special internal structure called erenchyma, a network of air channels in its roots that allow the plant to survive both drought and flooding. Almost no other crop on Earth can do that. It is also a perennial that can live for over 50 years. Bison and elk grazed it heavily, and cattle find it so palatable that early ranchers grazed it nearly to extinction before learning to manage it. Researchers have also documented associative nitrogen fixation in eastern gamagrass, meaning bacteria living in its roots feed it nitrogen directly, similar to legumes. It is one of the only grasses on the continent known to do this. Where eastern gamagrass grows, soil rebuilds itself. Where it disappeared, the Dust Bowl followed. Number 4. Illinois bundleflower. Botanists once called it the most important native legume in North America, but almost no one outside of agricultural science circles has heard of it. Illinois bundleflower is a perennial. Plant it once, and it returns year after year, fixing nitrogen, holding soil, and producing protein-rich seed. Since 1979, scientists at the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas, have been quietly working to domesticate Illinois bundleflower into a perennial grain crop, one that could eventually replace soybean and end the annual cycle of plowing that has destroyed American topsoil. Because its root nodules survive the winter, Illinois bundleflower begins fixing nitrogen earlier in the spring than any annual legume can. Cattle relish it for its high protein content. Quail and prairie chickens eat its seeds. If the Land Institute succeeds, this forgotten plant could change American agriculture forever. We would no longer have to choose between feeding ourselves and destroying the ground we feed from. Number 3. Blue false indigo. Before chemical dyes existed, American colonists used a wild plant called Baptisia australis as a domestic substitute for the expensive imported indigo dye. They called it false indigo. What the colonists never realized was that every plant they grew was quietly rebuilding the soil beneath their cabins. Blue false indigo is a nitrogen-fixing legume with a deep taproot that reaches several feet down. It is long-lived, drought-tolerant, and fire-resistant. A single plant can live for decades in one location, never needing fertilizer, never depleting the soil. It is the host plant for the wild indigo duskywing, the frosted elfin, and the hoary edge butterflies, all of which have declined as their host plant has disappeared. Native Americans used it medicinally for tooth pain, nausea, and as an eye wash. Its dried seed pods rattle in the wind, and children once collected them as natural toys. Blue false indigo is one of the very few perennial, native, nitrogen-fixing plants in America that requires zero maintenance once established. Plant it once. It rebuilds soil for a generation. Number 2. Big bluestem. This was the king of the tallgrass prairie. Big bluestem dominated an ecosystem that once stretched from Ohio to the Rocky Mountains, from Canada down to Texas. The deepest, blackest topsoil on planet Earth was built underneath it. Today, less than 4% of the original tallgrass prairie remains. The state of Illinois alone once held 35,000 square miles of prairie. Only 3 square miles remain. Big bluestem's roots regularly reach 10 to 12 feet deep, and some measurements exceed 15 feet. The Land Institute's famous side-by-side photograph of annual wheat roots, only 8 inches long, sitting next to big bluestem roots stretching past 10 feet, has become a symbol of regenerative agriculture worldwide. Big bluestem is a warm season grass, meaning it grows hardest in July and August heat when other grasses go dormant. That is why bison thrived on the high plains. After the Dust Bowl, Franklin Roosevelt's Soil Conservation Service planted big bluestem as part of the National Rescue. Prairie soils store carbon underground for thousands of years, making them a more durable carbon sink than forests. Restoring big bluestem is not nostalgia. It is a strategy for survival. Number 1. Lead plant. Early American pioneers absolutely hated this plant. They cursed it. They called it devil's shoestrings because its roots were so tough, so deep, so unyielding that they snapped plough blades. Pioneers tore it out of the prairie by the millions. They had no idea they were destroying the secret muscle of the tallgrass prairie. Lead plant, also known as Amorpha canescens, is a small silver-leafed shrub with delicate purple flower spikes and golden anthers. Its roots can reach 15 feet deep. It is a legume that fixes its own nitrogen from the atmosphere. It survives drought, fire, and the harshest winters of the Great Plains. The Meskwaki people of Iowa used lead plant as a biological prospecting tool. They searched for it because they believed it indicated the presence of lead deposits in the ground. The plant got its English name from the lead-colored silvery hairs on its leaves. Once, lead plant was a defining species of the tallgrass prairie. Today, it survives in less than 4% of its original range. We tore it out, ploughed under the prairie, and then watched the topsoil blow away in the Dust Bowl. But we can still bring it back. Every lead plant rooted in American ground today rebuilds nitrogen, holds soil, feeds pollinators, and remembers what this continent used to be. That is why it is number one. 15 plants, 15 forgotten miracles of American soil, each one capable of doing what fertilizer factories, irrigation pumps, and chemical sprays cannot do. They build life. They restore what we have spent a century destroying. The soil under your feet is alive, or it should be. The question is whether we will let it die quietly, or whether we will plant the ancient, patient green machines that built this continent in the first place. The Dust Bowl ended once because Americans chose to plant grass instead of ploughing prairie. The next chapter is being written right now in the choices farmers and gardeners make about which seeds they put in the ground. The soil is waiting. The plants are still here. The only question left is whether we remember in time.